Hey guys, Cyrix Gaming here, back with another Mortal Kombat 12 video. Today I wanted to have a bit of fun coming up with my own roster for MK12, and just what would be perfect for me to have when the game theoretically launches. I just want to preface this by saying that these are my own wishes and my own idea of a perfect roster. My roster will also be super unrealistic as to what's released. As of this video's recording in December 2022, MK12 has not been announced, but Ed Boon has been dropping more and more hints towards the game's existence recently, so I figured I'd start dreaming. So let's get into it. I only had one rule when I sat down to think about who I wanted on my roster, and that was to limit my choices to 25 combatants only. Recent MK games seem to start around the 25 character mark, and this is just so I don't get carried away. So let's begin. Number 1 and 2. I figured I'd start with the two obvious ones, Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Just figured I'd put these two together since they're going to be in the game no matter what. Sub-Zero is also one of my favourite characters from way back in the day, so it felt wrong not to include these two together first. Moving on to number 3, Havoc. The Cleric of Chaos Havoc. Havoc is easily my favourite character in the series, and he's criminally underutilized by NRS. He appears as a cameo in some endings in recent games, and he's the villain of the MKX comics, but he just doesn't appear in any of the NRS era games as a playable character. It's ridiculous. Imagine Havoc's body-bending playstyle, breaking his own bones and contorting his body as he moves around. With all the updated graphics and the 2D fighting style, it would be so cool. I've been campaigning for Havoc for too long. Make it happen, Ed Boon. NRS, please. Number 4, Ashra. Ashra is another character who interests me so much, but she hasn't appeared in ages. I also feel like we need some more NetherRealm characters who aren't just Revenants. Bring Ashra back instead of someone like Quan Chi or Shinnok and have her be the representative for the NetherRealm in this game. Next up, I'm going to do 4 at once. Number 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all male ninjas, and that's going to be Smoke, Reptile, Ermac, and Rain. These 4 would be my choice for the ninja representatives on the roster, aside from Scorpion and Sub-Zero, of course. Smoke coming back would be awesome, and if I had a choice, it would be Human Smoke, although I'd be fine with Cyber Smoke. Reptile and Ermac also both seem like safe choices to return. They're both super popular, and they've had awesome designs in MKX, and they both made cameos in the Crypt in MK11 with also pretty great designs. They just should have been playable. Finally, I picked Rain as well, and this time I want him on the base roster. I'd also like it if NRS kept his gameplay style from MK11 with the more magic-based moves alongside his Hydromancy. I would also really, this is kind of sidetrack, but I would really like a map dedicated to Rain. Some sort of like water-based Edenian map would be really cool. I've got another group of 3 put together. Number 9, 10, and 11 are Melina, Katana, and Jade. I picked these 3 for my female ninja reps over people like Frost or Tanya, purely because I prefer the OG lady ninjas. All 3 of them also immensely popular, and the fan outrage if they sat out another game would be crazy. Specifically Melina and Jade during the MKX and MK11 days, if you know what I mean. Moving on to number 12, Erron Black. Erron Black is the only NRS newcomer on this roster, and probably in my top 3 personal favourite characters. NRS did a really great job designing him in MKX and MK11, but for me, I felt like his gameplay in both games was lacking. I just couldn't gel with his gameplay in those 2 games. I couldn't really main him. But hopefully 3rd time's a charm and they can nail his gameplay for me a 3rd time. Moving on to number 13, Sindel. My favourite female character of the series, Sindel will always be on any wishlist I make. My number 1 hope is that they fix their mistake from MK11 by retconning her story. With the timeline being rebooted, they have the perfect opportunity to fix her story and move on from that mistake and the mess they made in MK11. But design and gameplay wise though, wouldn't mind it if they kept her MK11 aesthetics. She was easily my main in MK11, and incorporating her quant out into her gameplay was brilliant. Glad they brought that back. Her designs in MK11 were also quite amazing. Loved her. Number 14 is Sector. Sector is the only cyborg I chose to return, purely just because he's my favorite of the cyborgs. But if NRS wanted to give Triborg another shot, and this time give Triborg a proper backstory, give him an introduction into the lore as well, then I'd love to see the cyborgs remix them to Triborg one more time. But if they can't pull that off, just Sector for me. Number 15 is Fujin. I feel like Fujin was one of the only characters written really well in MK11. Quite liked his story. I liked what they did with him in Aftermath. That's again just my opinion on the story. We can go into that another time, but we won't right now. Gameplay-wise, I found Fujin very technical and pretty hard to play, which is not a bad thing. I just never put in the effort to learn him. If they brought him back in MK12, I'd be fine for them to keep him as a technical character. Maybe this time I'll put in the work and learn how to play as him. His MK11 designs were also pretty awesome, and I wouldn't hate it if NRS kept the short hairstyle from MK11 for some of his skins. That would be pretty cool. Moving on to number 16, I have Kenshi. I feel like Kenshi has been getting more and more important in each story he appears in, especially after MKX. In both the comics and the actual game's story, he was quite important. So I'd love to see where they could take his character in future installments. I also find his personality in MKX in particular to be really funny and entertaining, and I'd love to see Kenshi interact with some more characters. His gameplay in MKX was also pretty awesome, incorporating more of his telekinesis and some like more ghost type moves along with his sword. It was just really neat, really well done as well. Moving on to number 17, I have Sonya Blade. The only Special Forces rep I'm putting on here. I feel like the recent games have focused way too much on the Special Forces and their supporting characters, so I'd like MK12 to dial it back quite a bit on the Special Forces characters. So for my roster, I picked only Sonya, and that's just based on her iconic gameplay. Her leg grab needs to come back in MK12. We can't sit out another game without Sonya Blade's leg grab. Come on, guys. Moving on to number 18, we have Hotaru. If we're getting Havoc back, I'd love to see Hotaru come back as well to counter him. I also really find the whole Chaos Realm, Order Realm sort of war thing they had going on in the 3D era to be super intriguing, and I'd love to see NRS delve deeper into that, whilst also fleshing out the gameplay and the stories of the Chaos and Order characters like Hotaru and Havoc. Moving on to number 19, I have Reiko. It's been forever since Reiko was playable, but he appears quite frequently in supporting media for MK, which is why I'm frankly surprised he hasn't been playable in years. He was a central villain in the MKX comics and also a side villain in the 2021 MK movie. So when are we going to see him playable again? I'd also like to see him take over the mantle of Shao Kahn in future installments, give him the Wrath Hammer, but also make him more unique, make him faster than Shao Kahn. Just so that way we don't have to keep recycling Shao Kahn over and over again. Moving on, I've got at number 20 and 21, I have Serena and Natara. I popped these two ladies on here for the same reason as Reiko. They keep showing up as NPCs, but haven't been given a chance to shine as playable characters for far too long. Natara in particular has shown up in 2 of the MK movies made over the past couple years, one of the animated ones and in the 2021 live action movie. And Serena was in the MKX story, the actual game itself, as an NPC, but neither of them have been given a chance to shine in gameplay. I'd especially like to see how NRS would differentiate Natara from Scarlet in regards to their blood themes. And I'd just love to see what NRS can do with Serena, just because we really don't see Serena very often. So I feel like it would be almost a blank slate to work with. Moving on to number 22, we have Kai. Kai is my only White Lotus representative, and it's just based purely on his story being underdeveloped. I'm not too much of a Liu Kang and Kung Lao fan, so I'd like to see NRS flesh out Kai's character and have him be the central White Lotus hero for the story, especially considering he's been basically abandoned since MK4. He was in Armageddon, but I correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he appears in the story whatsoever. And his gameplay was just super basic, so I'd love to see what they can actually do with Kai, instead of just bringing back Liu Kang and Kung Lao all the time. Moving on to number 23, this one might be a bit controversial, but my only Black Dragon rep is Tarzia from MK Special Forces. Tarzia has never been playable, so she'd basically be a new character for new gameplay. She also appeared in the MKX comics, so she's appeared recently enough for NRS to get away with incorporating her into the story seamlessly, and I just feel like it'd be a way to introduce a new character without actually having to make a new character. So that's why I picked Tarzia for this spot. Moving on to number 24 and 25, I have Blaze and Onaga. These two I've grouped together as boss characters. Ideally, I'd like Onaga to be the final boss of the new game, unlockable after beating the story, but I would also really like Blaze to appear in some manner. I know that this would be hard, but I would also like NRS to try and experiment with their size like they did in Armageddon. Try and keep both of them as these really large, hulking, gargantuan figures. It'd be very hard to do gameplay-wise, but if they could balance it, that would be awesome and so unique. Next up, I know I said only 25 characters, but I do have a bonus 26 spot. This is something I threw in for fun, and because I thought it'd be it works pretty cool in another game, but they're Mimic Fighters. Anyone who's played Soul Calibur games will instantly know what I'm talking about here, but Mimic Fighters are a character on the roster whose fighting style is randomly picked from someone else on the roster. So for MK12's Mimic Fighter, and I will say again, this is highly unlikely, almost impossible to happen, but I would pick Chameleon/Chameleon, have them both pop up on the roster and use random fighter styles each time you pick them. Both of them would have their own unique designs, and they would probably be unlikely to appear in the story, but I'd imagine NRS would give them some kind of reason to be there. Obviously, you'd have the male Chameleon for the male characters and the female Chameleon for the female characters, but thought I'd mention that. Well, guys, that's my dream roster done. Please feel free to let me know in the comments if there is anyone on here you agree with, or who you'd want to swap out with your favorites. Don't forget to like, subscribe as well to see more MK content on my channel, and thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.